The number 30 is repeated 7 times in this farm. 800 is repeated 7 times. 900 is repeated 7 times. My name is Dan Paulson. I'm an independent researcher that is finding a pattern in the Bible that frames the entire Bible. For people that follow my work, you know what I'm doing is collecting a pile of terms that they're using to replicate a pattern. However, the terms that they're building to replicate the pattern are very well established. They're pointed to if you know how to find them. They are terms that I refer to as analogs because they are analogous to a location. And that'll unfold as we get into the video. In this case, I'm going to jump right into a kind of a higher level. I will post a link to the Sodom, the discovery for the Sodom farm. That is a recent thing. And what I'm referring to in a farm, it's an area where they are doing things with numbers and repeats of sequences that is creating a mass of other analogs that go with it. Let's get into the video. I am neither a theist nor an atheist. I will be using the Bible in a very academic way, in a way that is probably going to be incredibly unfamiliar to you. I have a major reveal. Okay, the Sodom analog farm was very critical to understand, and I thought it was complicated. I now am looking at this Adam to Noah lineage and realizing exactly what it is. It is deep. For anyone thinking that this somehow dovetails with past ideas of Bible codes or things like that, what I have done is completely independent. I don't follow anybody. And I found something that anything I show you is demonstrable. These sequences and patterns are absolutely visible once we look at them. The reason we don't see them is because we don't have them memorized like they did in antiquity. Now, this starts where, if you're familiar with my material, there's going to be a 3-7 grid is what I call it. It starts on the day 7 of the first creation story, where 7th day is said 3 times. Okay, I'm going to bring this work in right here and just talk about it again. The analog farms. These are areas that I'm finding that have incredibly weird, strange verbiage and a numbering system that we stop and examine. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to find that there are 3 and 7 are being used in ways to create more numbers that are going to also be in that same pool. It won't be just Eden 3, 7. It's going to be a whole bunch of numbers. We got an entire Bible to write. We can't make it. We've already used 3 and 7 about 450 times a piece on the Bible, the most used there is. We need to spread that out. But here we have it. On the 7th day, God ended his work. You see, that's 3, said 3 times. 7 was repeated 3 times. This is the start of the numbering sequence. 7 equals 3 equals Eden, which constitutes a starting point in life where we are pure. I hate to do these side jog things, but I want to continue to show parallels of other material. This is on a template that is also used in Greek mythology. And if you knew the myth of Jason and the Argonauts, he's the one that's supposed to rule the land. It's rightfully his, but King Pelias, his uncle, has it. This represents ourselves going back and destroying our earlier self to get our life experience back. We want to live aware of what's going on instead of just bouncing off of experience, wondering what's up. There is a point early in that story where he is told that he must sail to the far side of the earth and get the golden fleece. That represents this point right here. 7, 3, Eden, golden fleece. There's a point in the beginning prior to life experience that we actually can never get back to. Eden will never reappear. We can never get back to Eden because when we were in Eden, we were ignorant. We need to find that peace again, but the peace will never come from ignorance again unless we get a lobotomy or something. The only way you find peace now is to work through the pain, and then you find a place where peace is down the road where you now have experience. Canaan, Holy Land, Kingdom of Heaven within, other verbiage like that. Okay, this is book 5, chapter 5, actually, in Adam's generations. This is from the Genesis. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man in the likeness of God, and it goes on like that. And then we get these numbering things going on here that I've talked about recently. And there should be things that are attention getters. 130, 800 years, 900 years. Let's stop for a second and talk about those. Those are numbers that are in the Bible. You can go find videos on people trying to explain why those are why they were that way. How people used to be protected under the water, all kinds of stuff. These are attention getters. They're not real. You should look at that instead of trying to explain why it says that. You should be asking, why does it say that? This is, hello, McFly. That's what this is right here. It's not true. Nobody lives in 100 and something. But there's something else here, okay? I'm looking at these numbers and I find that there's all kinds of ways of sequencing them. I don't know what to do. I have to experiment, and this takes a while. You can see that there's an 130. That sounds like 130, doesn't it? 130. 800 years. That sounds like 800. Okay, all of those sound just like that, don't they? That's how we think about them. Now, I am going to process this differently and think, God, this is a long time ago. This is in English. It's not the original language. They put it in such a way that no matter what, if you translate, the code is still going to get there. So they're doing it by, instead of sending along local analogs, they're sending numbers, because those numbers are always going to be this, no matter what. A 7 today, 7 something is going to be, in 1,000 years from now, a 7 is still going to be the same quantity. That's not going to change, even if it said something like, whatever language it is. At the core, it's still going to have that exact meaning, that there are this quantity right there. Okay. But if you asked anybody around the world, even if they weren't Abrahamic, what 7 is, you would find laser precision on agreement. There is no deviation to what 7 is. So if you give 7 a meaning and then send that 7 around all over the place, that meaning will always be locked in one step away from what that 7 means. It doesn't continue to drift away. It's simple, and it's also very ingenious. But they're using a story to send messages. How are you going to encode it? How would you encode a message in a story you're telling somebody? You have to do it in the words and repeats and something. Find some way to send somebody messages by telling a story, nesting something in there. That's what they're doing. It's up to us to figure out what they did. Okay, let's go back and look at this again. I have to do something with these numbers. These numbers have always been sitting there just like haunting me. What are these? What are these? What are these? You work at them, you figure them out. You work at other places. Gradually, you start cracking into things. And quite frankly, I had to solve the Sodom analog farm before I could solve this one. This one is more complicated, but it taught me a lot. Oh my gosh, did I learn a lot. And I'm going to show you what I learned. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is we have to know what to do with numbers. And there's a variety of things we can do. Are those compound or not? If I see an 130, does that mean 130, or does that mean 100? And then also the number 30. Are those two separate numbers, or is that one compound number? That's what I need to know. We got 800. That's going to be just by itself. Then we run into a 930. Okay, make no bones about it. I have my mind separated from the story. I realize if you read this story, those are fixed years. Those are compound numbers if you read the story. I am not interpreting it that way. That's how it's being carried. I'm looking for something different. I'm looking for a secret in there that if it's consistent, then I can say it's probably there. Okay, then you go to different translations and you will find that the and isn't even there. So you start looking at that and going, okay, how can you keep this consistent? There's two ways. Number one, everywhere you put a line in, it is compound, just like it is. If it says 930, that means 930, not 900 and 30. 807 means 807. That's one way of doing it, except that I look right in there and I see 12, 7, I see 30. I see things that were developed as analogs in the Sodom farm that tell me, nope, that's not right. That 7 should be standing alone. It should not. It didn't develop a 807 and 3. It developed a 7 and a 3. That 30 was developed twice in the Sodom story when that was asked and then brought into play. That 5 was also said in the Sodom story 3 times, so the 5 was created into an analog at that point, and it occurred at an overlap between two procedures that were being used for developing analogs. So it's a fun thing. It eventually, as you look at it, you realize there's some pretty fixed things going on, but you have to have a level of memorization. You see, I'm still using the computer. So I look at that and realize there's another possible way to keep it consistent, and that is to say that every single number in here is a standalone, that none of them is compound. Treat them that way and see what happens. Then there's another part of it, and 100. And 30. Who lives 130? And then, well, he went on later. How old was he when he died? Okay. Adam lived 930 years and he died. Okay, we look at these and I'm going to suggest something right off the bat, that we need to just be realistic about this. These are the puzzle clues. You look at that and go, people don't live 130 years. They don't live 800 and X amount of years. You will find many videos on people trying to explain why those numbers are that way and why they're accurate and why it says that. They are a code, and they should be understood and recognized as a code because they need supernatural explanation. If they need supernatural explanation, that's okay, watch, I went really extreme with something. It blew my socks off. I got an analysis. Biblical 3-7 grid pattern and technical analog development for story obscurity being developed in Genesis. This is done by repeating words and numbers a specific amount of times that continue to point to each other. There is a very specific reason for this, as they are encoding a message of a self-guided path to inner healing, and that it is deep. Let's just look at the number patterns here. Okay, so as I got up here, what I did is I just left the story alone and I grabbed the numbers, period. And here's what we have. It starts off this way. Every time there is an 100, that's repeated 5 times in this lineage. And each time it is. 30 is one of the analogs that was developed in Sodom. So is 5. 7 is developed right in the beginning. 2 and 2 is said twice here from 60 and 80, and it's developed. You'll see it appear in many places as well. When we get to the 800, that's repeated exactly 7 times. So 800 is insignificant as a number. 800 is being used to say 7. 7 and 7. What it's doing is it's tying all of these to that same point. By saying 807, but it's repeating that 7 different times. What it's doing is it's giving that 800 a metaphorical weight of that same mental location of 7. But we see 7 was developed elsewhere. The 40 is developed in the Sodom farm. 30 was also there. The 5 is also there. The 90 I'm not sure of. I'm just going to keep collecting these. The 900 is also repeated 7 times in the lineage story. And that tied to 30, 12, 5, 10, 2, 9, 50. What do we have up here? We're linking these numbers together, and as well as the analog farm, or the Sodom analog farm. Okay, so actually, I'm going to go to a different location and show you something that I did. Here's another thing. Right here is where I was working out the 130. It's like, how is that? 130, or is it 130? I was putting all the numbers down here, and then here's a few where you're experimenting with the different variations. 890 and 5, or 800, then 90, then 5. Those sorts of things. And as you go through and I start collecting things, here's what I end up with. The number 30 is repeated 7 times in this farm. 800 is repeated 7 times. 900 is repeated 7 times. 100 is repeated 5 times. 5 is repeated 5 times. 60 is repeated 5 times. 5 is an analog developed elsewhere. This turns each of these into analogs then. This is just saying, because I'm this and I choose you, you are this too. Okay, the 2s, the 3s, I'm not certain of, but we have 7 and 2 were both repeated 4 times. 90 and 80 were both repeated 3 times. 7-3 grid. 300, 500, 700, and 70 each were repeated twice. And 15, 40, 10, 12, 9, and 50 are all said 1 time, but they will reference up with other locations. Do you see number sequencing in there that you go, oh, what is that weird stuff? That's what I'm talking about. I can see a scaffolding and what it's doing, but that's about the best place I can show it, where I've broken out numbers and you go, okay, yeah, there's something in the background back there. There's a structure that if you can't see the structure, you can at least see linking pieces that are so common. They're like a layer away. 800 doesn't sound like 7, does it? But if you repeat 807 times, we're putting clues in the puzzle. How do you build this? This is exactly how you would do it. This is downloaded Bible. Do your own search. Yeah, there's nothing, there's nothing here. There's no preaching. There's nothing going on. It's a reveal. And it's an understanding that we don't have these memorized. And you could recognize right off the bat that that's the problem. That if we did, we would see these, or we would be able to work them out in our mind, processing them, driving down the road when you're on those long trips. Pondering through, thinking through things, the potential would be there to figure it out, but you would have to have everything in place in memory. That's how you pull things around. It's kind of a three-dimensional space. However, I have to also admit that I don't have them memorized. However, I'm getting into them. But what I'm doing is I'm using the computer to circumvent my memory while knowing, okay, I know what I'm searching for now. So I just keep looking at those things. But quite honestly, I'm hooked into it enough now to realize how much time it's taking me and what it takes and how much learning and how much I'm putting into it and how much I'm poking and prodding and copying and pasting and testing and doing things that you would have to do that on your own, honestly, to see what I'm seeing. I can point some things out, but honestly, that's why it remains hidden. You have to look for it to see that. And it's really too deep. And because we don't have it memorized, it's not even in. We don't even have access to it. We don't have access to this if we're just reading the Bible. You have to count. If you knew the story by memory, the counting would be done. You could pull it in from all over the places, and that is what it needs to happen. This is only going to work if it plays out in the memory or in the spatial space, utilizing memory as a component part of searching the numbering. It's not, you know what? They're not using math. But when you get done, since that's what they're doing, you will find a mathematical procedure to it because it's something that is consistent. They are establishing a consistent code pattern. There will be math behind that. It doesn't mean that they're using math. It just means they're using a consistent code pattern. Think about it this way too. If you memorize this, you can play it out like a game in your mind. It's no longer linear. If you're reading it, it's a linear progression. If you can see all of it together, then you can see the pieces. You can see numbers from one place lining up to numbers in another place much better than when it's not in memory. You read that, the page is gone, you're not thinking about it anymore, you're reading something again, you may or may not recognize the patterns that are there. Most people do, but they just kind of dismiss them. They don't seem too significant. They're incredibly significant, though. I'm going to show you a couple things by playing around here. There's a line here that says, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Again, we don't care about the story. What we're looking at is the numbers. We've got a 7, and then a 70, and then a 7 again. So it looks to me like this is another way of developing an analog. You've got a 7, which is already established as 1 in the beginning, and then a 7 on the end, which is established, and in the middle there's a 70. Sound good? Let's take a look at something. If I go ahead and search for 70, it appears 5 times in the document. 5 is one of our numbers as well. You see the linking up. Okay, so to me it seems like I continue to see this growth of 7-3 in strange ways that continue to gather up other numbers, but it's not just gathering up that number. It's also along the way I created a 5, and now I'm going to point to it with a 7 again, but I'm going to verify it by repeating that same number throughout Genesis exactly 5 times. That these link-ups continue to happen to the point that you're like, holy smokes, it's like a net. Okay, this is the list we have, and I've got a few more things on here that I'm going to talk about, like this righteousness and covenant at the end. It fits the category. But here we have a 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Remember, the 3, 7 were the first two, and we're developing all the rest of these. The 10, 12, 17, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. We just did a 70 in there, didn't we? Yeah, let me put that in. We've got our 70. And I'm not going to go look it up. It just takes time. Righteousness, when you get down to the Sodom story and they're bringing in the 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, righteousness is said 7 times. That's what sets up the analog farm. By repeating righteousness 7 times, they've included that into the numbering system. Now all the numbers that are repeated in a certain sequence with righteousness are made into analogs as well. That's where we get our 5, 10, 20, 30, like so. Covenant, right at the end of the flood, when it's time for God to keep its covenant with Noah, that is said 7 times exactly. So those are added to the list. And you can also see what I've done here. I went ahead and added in the mathematical formula just to show it how simple it is actually. E equals all of these and more. E equals Eden. That's the starting point. This is a part of a repeating template that is always going to begin at a pure point in a person's life. Any of these become E. So if X, which is your new known word, if you're reading something and it says righteousness or covenant or 800 or 900, that's the X. If anything you read equals one of these up here, it was said 7 times, then Y, the new number with it, equals E as well. See, that's all they're doing. And it looks mathematical. It is. But it's really, it's just a structured verbal procedure. That's all. I'm going to take this list right here and I'm going to copy and paste it into the Old Testament, and let's go do some searching. Okay, Genesis 1, King James Version. I've got them here in red all at the top. These are the numbers that we've collected that come from this very document right here, including I've got righteousness and covenant there. My misspelling there is just so that if I do a search that they don't come up as one there. Let's do a few things. Tense, 5 results. It's on our list. Sarai, exactly 17 times. Noah, look at that, 41. Noah's a gotcha. This is a strange one because you might have a Bible that if it's descended from the Greek Septuagint, this will come up with only 40. One of the Noahs was removed. One of the clues that tells you to look at something is when you find a name in a story that repeats an inordinate amount of times, sometimes multiply. Look at here we have, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man in generations. Noah walked with God, and Noah begat 3. They're just hammering you with Noah. Start counting those. They're letting you know something. That's too much. We know who it is. We don't need to be told that much. You go through here and you're going to find that it was supposed to be 40. However, there was an addition. Okay, and what I'm going to suggest here is that if we read the Bible, we can see that there's actually 2 creation stories. One of them, I call it the 7-day, the 7-3. That's, to me, that was the one that was added in later. That the first one was probably a standalone, and it was the 5 rivers in Eden and how that started out. However, it did not have the 7 and the 3 in there. So it would have been a short standalone story, something like probably the Enuma Elish from the Babylonians, just one short story. However, it became something that continued on. It became a vast network. What happened then is they went back and they modified it. Noah was already in place. They were bringing 2 pairs of everything. Then later, as the 7-3 one gets added in, and you see that there's 2 times Noah is told what to bring on the boat. One time he's told to bring 2 pair of everything, and another time 7 pairs of certain things. So you see where that 7 came into play later, and that somewhere in that process, an additional Noah name was inadvertently left in, most likely. You know what, though? In order to see that or to buy off on that, and I'll just say right up front that this is based on what my observations are, is that the creation story all the way up to the flood, where it needs to be destroyed, is one template. That's the human life template till you get frazzled, and most people get there. That the calling, that the first Noah calling, which would represent the idea that I am Noah, I am going in and destroying my earth. I want to improve my life. I want to emerge out the other side naked of this, feeling different off of my new wine, my new vineyard, whatever my new life is on the other side of this healing experience. And I'm uncovered. I want to go experience that. However, as the stories go on, why would they suddenly say bring 7 pairs? What is? It looks like if you read the story literally, that you got some explaining to do. And it doesn't really work. You have to just believe it or not. I see that the story is there for a reason, though, the same as with the Babylonians. It never was real. It is a representative idea or a metaphorical idea that we destroy our own world or that we get our own kingdom back or all of that. So flooding and destroying the planet is not the physical planet. It is my experience on this planet. I want to start over. That's where the idea of going back to day 7 comes from in some of the material, or to be like a child to find the kingdom of heaven, to be back to that place where you had not judged life and gotten all caught up in it. Although things have happened that hurt us along the way, we've got a lot of work to do in the material. That's not what this video is about. I have a lot up on that. I'm going to just stick with showing you some patterns. You know what? I could stay here in Genesis all day, but what I want to suggest is that this is maintained throughout Abrahamic material. Let's just pop up a couple of different examples here. Okay, bear in mind what I am revealing is a hidden later, but it's only hidden because we're not looking at it. You will see that as we move along. The first thing I want to do here is Matthew 1. I've got the King James Version. Let's go up here and do I just know to do some basic searching. I'm going to look for the number 3. 3 appears 12 times, so 3 is one of our analogs, as is 12. What about 7? 7 is one of our analogs. It's the grid. 3, 7 grid and the 12 right there. Are we keeping it tight or what? What's a 12? 12 times. Well, oh my gosh. Okay, right off the bat, David. "17 times, just like Sarai was. How about Abraham? 7 exactly. Okay, we can just keep going and going through this. You see that layer sitting right there. We're just looking at it. It's right in our face. We don't know it. Okay, let's play around a bit more. What I'm doing here in the New Testament is showing that this is being maintained, that the Jewish, whoever was writing that in the background, whoever was creating those analogs and putting in the template, that continued on. It was maintained in Jewish material, and when it came time for the Roman Catholic material, it is still there. They maintained it. Somebody in the background knows this and are purposefully maintaining it. How old was Jesus when he astounded the wise men in the temple? 12 years old, and 12 appears 12 times in the book of Luke. 12. See our grid? You know what? That's numbers only. I'm going to back up here. Look at, I've learned to do this. In the days of King Herod of Judea. I'm going to just check what Herod, how many times does it come up? Just to see what's going on. 15. 15 is one of our numbers. Caesar. 7 times exactly. 10 exactly. All from our list. You see that they're continually repeating things. This is so much it can't be an accident. Let's keep looking at more, actually. All right, next I'm going to bring up Job. Let's go jump way back into history. And I'm going to maintain that they're going to keep the same template somehow. We've got to start in a pure place somewhere with kind of pure things. And right off the bat, I see that there was once a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That starts right off. Okay, Uz needs to be a pure place, so it has to fit somehow on the 7-3 grid. Well, it's said 3 times. Okay, we've got our purity right there in the beginning. Blameless and upright. Okay. 7 sons and 3 daughters. How do you like that? 7 represents a pure male, the time of purity. In the conscious, that would be like Adam and Eve. Pure, not sinned yet. 7, 3. This is an early time. 7 appears 10 times. 10 is one of ours that was created in the Sodom analog farm and confirmed in the Adam lineage farm. Okay, wine is said 3 times. Wine is, you're going to find this featured as a good thing. Noah, after the flood, he had created a vineyard, got buzzed off his own wine, was naked in his tent. This represents metaphorically the idea that we are now uncovered and we are feeling good after creating a new life experience after a healing process, and we've left the past behind. Jesus is going to say to put new wine into new wineskins. That's what he did. Wine is really a new way of experiencing life. This is not literal wine. This is a metaphorical term, an analog, which means the way that you feel. Wine is said 3 times here. You want a good feeling. Wine's good in the way that it's used here. I can just keep going and going and going with it, and I think it gets boring at some point. People have to do it on their own. In the end, I wanted to show that not only was that analogous, kind of this network of analogous terms being created up front, but that it's going to be continued in use throughout Abrahamic material, that same numbering sequence based on the first analogs that are created are very much fixed in place. And that whoever is in the background doing that is remaining on that, really strictly on that. The outward stories don't sound like it. They're fantastical. Once you realize the patterns and what's going on, the stories are carriers. And it works for the people. There might be a land of Uz. So people would say, well, you don't question that. Job came from Uz. You're interpreting the story and realizing the story doesn't matter. It's carrying something. What we're talking about is on the template. You're starting from a pure place in life. The man from the land of Uz is the same thing as Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden before first sin, or Abram and Sarai while they were still in Canaan in a land of famine before leaving there and going to Egypt. These are all metaphorically representing us by ourselves, our male and female component, or our individual self, and I mean inner and outer, conscious and subconscious. I don't want to use the term male and female. That makes it sound like we all have male parts and female parts. They're using analogs here to represent a mental hierarchy. The consciousness is the one that's in charge. It's the one that says, I like this, I don't like that. I'm going to remember it this way. The subconscious is the one that goes, all right, thanks. That's what you gave me. That's what I have to work with. The subconscious now acts that out. That is represented by the female giving pain repetitively in childbirth. It is not a male-female thing. It is a mental process about what we process and then what we become as a result of the way we process it, and then how to reprocess it in such a way that we cease being products of the way we were at first when we were just blindly living life not knowing that. That is what is really in here, that is what I see. It becomes interactive. It becomes incredibly difficult to see. And me just punching up numbers like this doesn't help anybody with anything. I realize that. You have to see it for yourself. There's a point where it becomes obscure in the mind of comprehension because it requires such a thinking and like the synaptic network that has to be grown into place by continually doing this and either having the computer or, I remember some of the stuff now just by sheer repetition, but not even close to what they did. They did this for a living. I had to go off and do all kinds of other stuff in life. They didn't. This is what they did. If they weren't, they're probably even talking about that as they're, dyeing textiles or, herding the sheep or something like that. This is it. This is what you're trying to figure out. You can see as you go through there, boy, there's a lot of depth in that, and that you would not access it if you didn't have it memorized. It's as plain as day. At some point you go, okay, that's the problem. That's why we can't get it. This is one of those topics that's very difficult because so many just foil hat basket case people over the years have been at the Bible and the numbering system and the square root of this and things like that. And I think, what is that little shepherd kid dealing with? We put too much into it. We got to back it down. We got to get into their shoes and live their life or pretend that we are. And something else begins to emerge. A simplicity at the same time. There's a depth of layering that is not that complicated. It's just like you see what's happening. Taking words and creating a pile of other words or of other terms, not just numbers, but words as well. And throughout the material, as you search through that, you're going to find that process continuing in all of Abrahamic material, in all of valid Abrahamic material. Don't download the Book of Mormon looking for this. Joseph Smith had no clue what was in there. He just created a religion without a way out without a real, that inner path. He didn't know it was there. It's gone. You're not going to find it in the Book of Mormon. You'll find it in the Bible. You won't find it in people's downstream versions of explaining the Bible. They don't know it either. People that are telling you how to worship God are not understanding the template. There is something deeper. I see it because I approach it, again, not as a Christian or as neither a theist nor an atheist, but somebody who goes, I've studied a lot of things from antiquity, and I see something common, and I want to look at all of them with equal footing. Open-minded, seeing what's there. And this is what emerges. But this is the most complicated one out there. Nothing else is, no other myth has it nested this deeply. This one is hard to see. That's why people say, yeah, that's not there. I've heard enough of that. Get out of here. It's crazy. Meanwhile, you look at, I don't know who's been showing these kind of numbers yet. Again, people that approach trying to explain this with a preconceived idea of a supernatural outcome, they're not finding the answers. They will not find the answers. They'll come up with all kinds of numbers and patterns and things like that that'll be just, yeah, throw them in a basket. That's where they belong. I was referring to basket case. Probably a little too obscure on that one. Yeah, no, there's something in here, but you look at it and you go, this is accessible to little kids. This is ours. It is. It's for us. If we can see it, if we can find our way through it. And that the carrier case is for those to, well, it has many reasons. It has many purposes today. Many. Meanwhile, what's in there? You know, the Pope knows this. Yeah, obviously he does. He's trying to make corrections in the way people treat the material. It's not physical. And man on man is not properly interpreted. It's not about the physical world. Okay, hope the video was fun and interesting and kind of show some of the things that I see in my head, but I can't explain them. But in this case, I went farther because I started shifting those numbers and looking at different things, and suddenly something else emerged. It was like you have to play around with them like that and try different things, and you begin to see things. And then that shows you more, that helps you dig farther. I look at this now, and the more I realize, the more I look at, the more I think I got something, the more I realize it's bigger than I can imagine. I can't see the edge of this. It just goes on and on. It's a mystery, but it's slowly revealing itself. Be great to have some help. All right. Hope it was enjoyable. See you in the next video.